now, broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California, your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Here they go again. You got Hillary Clinton out there, front and center, talking about confiscating guns. She wants to use the buyback program like they did in Australia and mentioned that the Australian government was able to curtail the supply and set a different standard for gun purchases in the future. And it might be worth considering doing this on a national level. This is after President Obama hinted at Australian-like gun confiscation in reaction to the heinous attack at the Umpqua Community College. Obama said, "We know that other countries, in response to one mass shooting, have been able to craft laws that almost eliminate mass shootings. Friends of ours, allies of ours, Great Britain, Australia, countries like ours. So we know there are ways to prevent it." Well, the only problem with all that is when you try to take all the guns away from Americans, we're not like Australia. We're not like the UK or Great Britain. We're a completely different culture. Guns are so deeply ingrained into our psyche and into our history and into our sense of who we are that you would never get Americans to willingly turn over their guns, even if you did offer to buy them back. And the very idea you would even do that is insanely offensive. Because here's the problem, and it always comes back to such simplicity. I feel as if perhaps maybe I'm not being obtuse enough or complex enough for those on the left, but I simply believe that the only rational and reasonable way, and by the way, they always try to make gun control sound reasonable. Let's have reasonable gun laws. Let's have measured rights. Let's restrict your privilege so that the violent people won't be able to access guns. But see, in the interest of being reasonable and enacting what they like to call common sense gun legislation or gun restrictions, they ignore a simple fact. Criminals are never going to abide by any of these laws. Criminals do not operate in the government-structured market. You know what the government did to healthcare with Obamacare? Completely destroyed the healthcare system and delivery and insurance process in the United States. It is a shambles. It is a nightmare to try to get health coverage anymore. You're better off just to pay the penalty and pay your own way or whatever. But it is not the booming free market that we once had. And a free market in healthcare may offend some people, but in terms of firearms, when the government comes in and puts so many restrictions and structures the market, meaning you go to your local Turners, which I always recommend you go to because they're a sponsor of this show, and be sure to mention the Tim Donnelly Show and get an additional discount. But when you go in there to buy your gun, you got to go through a 10-day waiting period. You've got to start out with a gun safety course, which you pay, I believe, $25 for. You got to go up to the cash register for that, go back there, sit down with them, go through that. Then now you're qualified in some manner to actually purchase the gun that you're not going to get today. It's not Turner's fault. It's not the fault of the gun sellers. It is the gun retailers. This is the fault of the government that doesn't trust you. I mean, my God, why can't we just run a background check and you could be out of the store in 15 minutes? It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to most Americans. Oh, wait a minute. You're a criminal? You want to buy a gun? Hey, just go to the back the back of this store. Just go to that parking lot there and meet the guy at 4:00 in the morning, and you can buy whatever you want out of the trunk of his car. That we had a caller in here a couple weeks ago named Hanoi who said that his neighbor and his older brother used to hang out there or something, but his neighbor sold guns out of their house to criminals. Illegal guns that had been all the identifying marks, the serial number and everything had been removed. And these guns were sold for the express purpose of committing murders and committing robberies and committing crimes. They were sold to people who didn't want to be traced and didn't want to go through the system. That is never going to change, even if Hillary Clinton tries to confiscate every gun in America. First of all, you're never going to get everybody's guns. We've been through that time and time again. I mean, seriously, I'm just curious, and you're welcome to call in at any time, but what would you do if the government of the United States said they're going to confiscate guns, and so you have a limited period of time? Let's say they give you 3 months where they're going to buy back your guns at some ridiculously low price, which means you're not going to get the full value. So then you could always make the case it's unconstitutional taking. What would you do? Because after the 3-month period, they're coming for you. See, the 3-month period is just to put everyone on notice and create awareness and get as many guns back as they can. Then they go after the hardcore people and anybody who has a registered weapon. And this is something you need to keep in mind. When you register a firearm, you now make yourself a target. When you have a government that is hell-bent on depriving you of your natural, inalienable right to defend yourself. This is a natural right. That comes from God. Doesn't comes from the Creator, comes from a much higher source than government. We don't get our rights from government. Government is there to protect and respect our rights. But all they do nowadays, especially in California, is infringe them. And of course, we're going to continue talking about Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, who wants to be your next governor, and he wants to make you go through the same background check, the same obstacles course, just to buy a box of rounds for a gun you already own. The government in California wants to turn gun owners, law-abiding gun owners, into criminals. That is their goal. They want to make it so uncomfortable. They want to make you so nervous about complying that you just decide not to buy any more guns. Or leave the state. Yeah, that's what we need. One more reason for Californians, especially law-abiding, tax-paying Californians, to up and leave. 323-746-TALK. Talking about gun confiscation. What would you do? We'll take your calls when we come back. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about firearms. Firearms equal freedom. And when your government wants to take control of your guns, it ain't about gun control. There is no such thing as gun control. It is about control. It is about controlling the population. It is about controlling and curtailing your freedom because your government considers you a threat. We've established that. We've talked about that many times on this program. The Department of Homeland Security 4 years ago commissioned a study, spent millions of taxpayer dollars to come up with the absurd conclusion that the greatest threat, terrorist threat facing the United States is not from jihadists. No wonder, I guess, they don't spy on them. They're too busy spying on you. Not from liberal leftist nut jobs who hate guns or hate people or are racist or whatever, who are mentally disturbed, who decide to shoot up colleges. Almost every one of these has turned out to be a leftist, not somebody who is on the right side of the political spectrum, regardless of whatever the news media says. And I'm not saying that they're Democrats. I'm not blaming the Democrats for these crazy people. These crazy people, these disturbed people, these people who are hell-bent and have murder in their hearts and souls, they are the ones responsible for what they do. But the government they're not satisfied with just holding them accountable, and they are obsessed with taking away your right to defend yourself. They push a narrative. They say more guns equals more violence. No, more guns in the hands of private citizens, according to a Harvard study, equals less crime. It's just logical. We're going to go to the phones here and take your calls. We've got Mike from Wrightwood. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I think it's getting really incredible considering the fact that if you remember how we became a country, it started with the firing on the green, which was the British's attempt to take away the weapons of the colonists that were to become Americans.
Right.
So
it was the original.
How we started as a nation.
It was the original gun confiscation attempt at Lexington and Concord that failed because a shot was fired and a revolution was sparked.
Right. And it's, we're looking at the same thing now. And here we are, we're bringing people into this country. And I heard them talking about how, the UNN's going to be looking at these Syrians they're going to bring over here. Well, my job was actually to profile these guys, to spend some time with them, talk to them, find out who was bad, who wasn't, put them in Camp Bucca where they stayed for a while. But the only hand-to-hand combat that I had in Iraq was an insurgent, what they call insurgent, and the guy was a Syrian. It was at the top of the list that was wanted. So when they talk about bringing Syrians over here, taking our weapons, you're going to bring the enemy, put them on our places, who are going to complain that they're not being fed right or don't have good enough jobs or their houses aren't great. Well, all of us that have served, that have been in Iraq and Afghanistan and seen the huts they live in, for any of them to say that any house we give them, I don't care where you put them, they're better off. Or they complain because of what they do. It's going to get down to where it's going to be time for the militias to start getting together, getting ready. And, when the government tries to pass that law, then it's time that the government be removed. And, I've always stood up, and said that it's never going to happen. There's no way. The military's too strong. But you got 43 million veterans out there that fought for this Constitution. You got another, I think it's 300,000 more spread out all over the place that are serving right now. You got National Guards, I would get to the states to call the National Guards.
Oh, let me stop you for 1 second because you made a great point, Mike. You said you have 43 million veterans who fought for the Constitution. They didn't fight for the government. They fought for the Constitution, and they swore an oath to uphold and defend that document which enshrines our freedom and which literally curtails the government. And now, with it under assault by the government, it puts veterans, it puts law enforcement, it puts everyone who wears a uniform in a very dangerous predicament because they either have to side with the Constitution or side with the government.
But the key of this is going to be that the states that are going, like Texas is probably one, Arizona would probably be another one. They would have to call the National Guard up right away because what the president's going to do is he's going to go ahead and nationalize under Title 10 and make all National Guard units reserve, the active duty. Therefore, the states will no longer have control over those because the commander-in-chief of your National Guard is your governor, unless the president invokes Title 10. Then you become a U.S. soldier under the president of the United States, your commander-in-chief. So, there's things that, people probably don't look at that don't understand that, the states do have control of your National Guard. That's why we say the National Guard is not a militia, because the government can take those troops and order them active duty and make them the government's troops. That's why the militia needs to be something that's outside of the government, outside of the control, just like they were at Lexington. When
the militia is you and I. The militia is every citizen who is armed, who understands that what's at stake. That's who I look at as the militia. I know there are some organized militias. I have met many of the leaders of them, and I've seen the groups, and they're a growing, fast-growing force, especially in California. But the militia is much bigger than any organized militia because it's every single citizen who is a patriot who is armed. And you really can't be a patriot without being armed. It's kind of hard.
Well, it's kind of like we need to get back to the Minutemen. Guys need to be ready, especially if you're in the militia or whatever else. Have your stuff ready, be ready to go. And then when the call goes out, and we do it just like we did in 1776, if that's what it takes. Because there's no way that a government in this country can go through something like that. There's no way. They're not going to have a civil war.
We will not be disarmed. We will not be disarmed in this country. Period.
So,
period. And
no
anyone foolish enough to attempt such a thing will provoke they will have a war on their hands, the likes of which they have never seen, because you have millions upon millions, and I've spoken to many of them. I was at a political event about 2 years ago, and I met a couple of former cops. And, I always wonder how cops are going to relate to me because, I'm a law and order guy, but I'm also huge on civil liberties. As a matter of fact, coming up right after the break, we're going to have a guy on talking about a new law here in California that prevents the government from spying on your phone and your electronic devices unless they have a warrant. and I've always been an arch defender of civil liberties, so I've had kind of let's say a unique relationship with law enforcement because I also respect and support what they do. But the thing is here in California, we've got a really tough situation, and I'm not going to be one of those people who is. I'm on the side of the people. I'm on the side of the Constitution, and everybody's going to have to make a choice at some point.
And it's been violated so much. I mean, and I can't really get into some of this, but there's places out there, and people would be amazed at what we're watching right now, what we see right now, and what we get a hold of. People that are paranoid, running around with that little stupid, aluminum foil in your hat kind of stuff, it ain't going to do you any good. It's once you start putting your name into the system, you go apply for a credit card, you go apply for a loan. Everything you do is so tracked, it is unbelievable. I can find out so much on you without even really having to look. And then you add a computer to my hands, I can find out more. You give me a classified, I can find out everything you've done from grade school all the way on up. And I can actually pinpoint you, look at you, and watch you from the sky with a 30-second delay.
Why can't the government, why can't they find the guy who goes on social media and says, hey, I'm going to kill a bunch of people tomorrow at an Oregon college in Northwest Oregon? Why can't they find that guy? Why couldn't they find the jihadis who went on Twitter and said, I'm going to go kill me some infidels in Texas?
There's no way they couldn't have, because whenever you use your computer, especially if you're dumb enough to use it at your house, you're going to use a little, you got your 192.168.18, and your number. It's registered to that. It's registered to your house. You have a username that's there. It doesn't matter. It's going to go back to that exact address. That thing could have been tracked exactly where it came from. That's how they find all this information after they get you. And they start going through your stuff. Your address is there. You can't get away from your address. I can send anything from anywhere in the world if I know my home address on my computer. And I can send it to my computer at the house.
And that's what I was saying. 2 years ago, I ran into a group of ex-cops, and they were telling me that they expected to see some sort of a revolution. And what surprised me is they were on our side. That kind of surprised me. Yeah. So I think there is going to be a very interesting dichotomy here in our society going forward into the next few years as we figure out who is with the Constitution and who is with the government. And you know what? It's going to be up to we the people. Mike, thanks for the call. We've got Stephen Greenhut, San Diego Tribune columnist, coming up with a great article on your civil liberties. You won't want to miss it. Hey, this is the Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. And you know what? Once in a great while, Jerry Brown gets it right. And I'll give him his due. Yes, I know I've praised him 2 days in a row. It's very painful. But I want to bring on Stephen Greenhut, who is a columnist at the San Diego Union Tribune, who has written a great article on some good news. We've been telling you all about the bad news in California when it comes to guns and those civil rights, but when it comes to the government spying on you, we just made it a little harder for him. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. You know, I tried to do a little good news, but it's so hard to find up here in Sacramento. I mean, it's yeah, I was just on the weekend. I was just at this in Santa Maria. We were doing a Scared Straight program. You know, where you remember the old the Scared Straight. You take kids, at-risk youth, as they'd call them, to the prisons. Don't follow a life of crime. All citizens ought to spend a little time in the legislature where you were, and listen to some of these folks, and maybe they'd be scared straight and think more carefully about who they vote for.
Stephen, I just want to say one thing to you. I feel your pain.
Well,
because I've been there, and I've done that.
Oh, yeah,
and,
you were really right in the thick of it. So I'm just looking from a little bit afar, but you were in the thick of it. But the good news here on the electronic privacy front, and the governors, there didn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to the governor's signings and vetoes, and most of the stuff was bad. But yeah, there's a bill requiring, get this, police are going to have to get a warrant before rifling through your cell phone, which is, it's not like a cigarette pack, which was a legal case. The California, Supreme Court said that, no, just going through all my work contacts and my personal contacts and my photographs and on and on and on, and my work computer. That's the same thing as a cop searching my cigarette pack. So
yeah,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, this is insane, because if they're looking for evidence of a crime and you're innocent, they could find something else that's damaging to you that might not be any of their business. And we know now in this information age, hey, once it's out there, it's out there.
Oh yeah, and we've seen police who illicitly send out people's photographs, and there's I don't want personal things. And I actually heard from police after I wrote this who said, well, the basic, if you got nothing to fear. I'm like, well, that is the argument in a police state, if you got nothing to fear. But we don't not yet, or at least we're not supposed to live in a police state. So I'm sorry. Get a warrant. And their argument is, well, it's difficult. Well, the difficulty of the bureaucrats and the government, not my problem. The Constitution wasn't written to make it easier for police to do their job. It was written to protect the citizens. And even if I did something wrong, I still have a right to due process. And there's so many laws. I mean, we passed 800 new laws in the state just recently. Law after law after law, regulation after regulation, and we pass laws and we just let the regulators fill in the blanks. So, the possibility of doing something wrong becomes easier and easier with every passing day, right?
Yeah. But see, the Constitution was designed to put a set of handcuffs on the government, to throw the government up against the wall and handcuff them and restrict them from infringing on our rights and our freedom. So one thing I noted when I was up there is whenever there was anything to do with cops, it became a very personal issue. The Police Chiefs Association would show up, and everybody was told you're supposed to be a law and order guy, and they would strong arm you. And this is not about individual police officers. I have a lot of respect for people willing to put their lives on the line, but they have to have twice as much respect, given the amount of power they have, for the constitutional rights and civil rights of every American, period.
Well, yeah, and the problem up here, you're right, exactly. And the police, though, I know, I've done a lot of reporting on police, and they're not all good guys, and they're members of government, and even the good guys a lot of the good cops believe that they have an unlimited right to search us and arrest us and do anything they want to us. And what I find is members of your party
Whoa.
consist.
Whoa,
yeah,
whoa.
Yeah,
Don't be
true.
putting me into a party.
No, I know. But
I am a very
reluctant.
I am a very reluctant Republican, and the only reason I don't leave that party is because they want me to.
Oh no, I got you, and I'm not trying to hit on you because you were clear. You put civil liberties. That was a very prominent part of what you believe in. But most the other thing. Well, here's the other part of the column I was talking about was dealing with the Fifth Amendment. If you're going to take people's property through civil asset forfeiture, then you ought to get a conviction. Only two Republicans in the Assembly voted for that, to require conviction first. And some of them, and some of them
Stephen,
are people you and I know well who are overall good people. And
that was so painful to watch. It made me wish I was back in that building for a brief moment, because I would have given a barn burning speech on that. And but when you quote from the Constitution, which you do in your article, you quote the Fourth Amendment. Sometimes I wonder if people who are actually in the legislature are hearing those words for the first time.
Well, they may be, but even I imagine some of the Democrats who probably maybe hadn't even read the document ever, maybe some of them, not many, did the right thing, because the Democrats are allied with the unions, and whatever the unions want, they get. But these Republicans, essentially, anything that's law and order. So I'm thinking of one Assembly person who always talks about the Constitution. I usually applaud when she does it, but she didn't vote in favor of the conviction. I had another Republican Assemblyman come out off the floor, and I had mentioned something to the effect of, he asked me how I was doing. I'm like, well, I'm just scratching my head wondering why you just shredded the Constitution. And he told me it was more complicated than it seems, but it isn't. It's not complicated. It's simple. You just read the words in that document. You can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Letting police take my car or my house. They tried taking a building from a $1.5 million building from some folks because one of their tenants sold $37 of marijuana to an undercover police officer. That's not due process. And the argument from the police agencies and the police unions and the police chiefs is, look at all the money we're going to lose. Well, you know what? If I rob you and then I'm forced to give it back, I'm going to lose some money. But the problem is I didn't have any right to take it in the first place.
And that's the whole point right there. And see, this, what you're really talking about, and this is where I think Republicans miss the boat, because there's a tremendous bumper crop out there of young people without a party. And I don't mean 18-year-olds, because most of them don't vote very consistently. I'm talking about people from 20 to 35 who just feel lost. And civil liberties are one of the biggest issues to them. And it's not complicated. It's about restricting the massive, ever-expanding growth of power among a powerful centralized government.
Exactly, and local government too, because the locals know where you live, and yet this is the thing that infuriates me with the Republicans is I'm always hearing them yammer about the need to reach out to minority communities who don't typically vote for Republicans. Well, nobody typically votes for Republicans in this state anymore, but to other communities, to young people, and yet opportunity after opportunity comes around, and they don't even make the argument, like on eminent domain. They don't take the right side of the argument on civil asset forfeiture, on police abuse, on these issues that are pure limited government issues, and then they pass on all these issues, and they can't figure out why young people and poorer people and working class people really aren't all that interested in their BS.
I just finished a referendum on an issue that the Republican Party would not embrace. Now, a lot of Republicans voted against forced vaccinations, but the party itself refused to take a position because they didn't want to embarrass one of their members. Well, that's ludicrous. I mean, to abandon a principle. Now, you know what was at stake? there were tens of thousands, maybe representing hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of very active people who hate their previous party. Most of them are former Democrats, but they have no place to go because nobody will really embrace them and say, hey, wait a minute, we're with you. And this may be the only issue we're with you on. It was a strange bedfellows, because I was out there with my NRA hat on. I'm a big gun rights guy. But at the same time, I had liberal Democrat school teachers coming up to me and saying, you know what, because of this forced vaccinations, I no longer trust the government. I'm starting to understand that gun control ain't about public safety. It's about government controlling us. And so I'm now with you. I was like, wow.
Well, that's the way, that's the way you reach people. And you know what? I've voted many times in my life for people with whom I disagree on many, many things. But there's a hierarchy of issues. If there's a candidate who's really good on some issues that I care about, which are, for me, it's mostly the liberty issues. Even if somebody's going to be good on civil asset forfeiture and property rights, even if they're taxers and spenders, which bothers the heck out of me, but I might vote for them if I feel that believe that they're authentic and they're good on a handful of issues. But Republicans are so scared of their own shadow, they basically have one issue. They're not going to allow tax increases. But okay, good. I don't want tax increases. I don't want to feed the beast either. I think the government has far too much money. But there are other issues, and other issues that they need to emphasize to resonate with the public. And also, I'm thinking of one legislator who talked about Republican who said that he's always going to side with the children. So in other words, he'll always vote to spend more money, but then he won't vote to pay for it. So that's really not an issue that's going to. I don't think that's going to resonate with many people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we're talking with Stephen Greenhut, San Diego Union Tribune columnist. Stephen, we're going to hold you over for one quick break here, and we're going to continue talking about this critically important topic. If you want to call in, you got a question, 323-746-TALK. Hey, welcome back. We're talking to Stephen Greenhut, San Diego Union Tribune columnist, who's written a great article about a new law, a law I actually like, and I pretty much hate almost every new law. Stephen, welcome back to the show. I want to take a caller and take a quick question. Then I want to ask you what is actually in this bill and what it does. Hey, welcome to the show. You are live on air with myself and Stephen.
Hi, my name is Alfredo. I'm calling from Barstow, California. I'm a former Democrat, and I'm now a hardcore Republican. And you guys are right on the ball with what you're saying about people switching from the Democrat Party to the Republican side. But mainly my question is about the mayor from Stockton that got his stuff confiscated by the feds coming back from a trip from China. Do you guys know anything, any updates on that, of what the federal government is saying their excuse was to confiscate his personal items as well as his city-issued electronics?
I haven't followed that. Even I followed the Stockton bankruptcy, but I haven't followed the goings on with that one.
Now, did you say the mayor from Stockton?
Yes, the mayor from Stockton. A couple weeks ago, it was on the news that he was coming back from a trip from China, and when he was going through Customs and Immigration, or Homeland Security folks asked him to turn over his electronics, both computers, I believe I read on the
and a cell phone.
Yep, exactly, and they even asked him for his password. And the mayor then came out and said, according to the news report, that he was 100% sure they were not going to find anything illegal, but that he was worried about them accessing confidential information relative to Stockton business issues and their recent bankruptcy and other contracts that they're redoing, that they would be afraid would come out to the light and embarrass probably, important people or union leaders, et cetera.
A couple issues. I mean, obviously they need, and this with the Electronic Communications Privacy Act requires, the government to have. Now this is federal here, but it requires, police to have a warrant, have probable cause. So, I don't know anything really about the specifics of the case, but if they had probable cause, then that's one thing. But if they're just going on a fishing expedition, question a lot of those things. It sounds like maybe they should have been public documents anyway. I don't know, but I tend to believe that the widest possible amount of information about city business dealings and bankruptcy dealings, and I've dealt with the city of Stockton on their bankruptcy and some of the weird numbers they're using that they wouldn't provide, the background data on. And I'm a big believer on open records. We ought to have the public looking over the shoulders of the public officials.
And that is true, but like he said, that they should have probably obtained a warrant.
Yeah. On anything like anyone, even if you're an elected official, anybody, you should have a warrant and probable cause, and that's what the Electronic Privacy Act does. And there was a court case that I think it was the U.S. State Supreme Court, the Diaz case, where our Supreme Court justices ruled that police had every right to, without a warrant, just kind of go on a fishing expedition with your cell phone or your tablet, or these are sophisticated computer devices. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court in the Riley decision overturned that, and now what the Electronic Privacy Act is doing is kind of codifying. The justices said that the states ought to have these in law, so it's putting into code those sort of restrictions. The police, a lot of them complain, but eventually we're okay with that. They did complain very loudly and used a lot of political strong arm techniques to stop the reform on the civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah, according to the mayor, his lawyer and him have not even been given any reasons why it was it was taken from him. His stuff was taken from him, and they told him that it was going to be returned to him in 48 hours, which it wasn't. So
yeah, I just don't know about that case. Tim, do you know about it? I don't know about it. No,
I don't, but it's funny. I know the mayor. He actually supported me in my governor's run, Anthony Silva. You know what I'll do, Alfred? I'm going to check into that. I'll talk to him, see if I can get him on, or Alfredo, I'm sorry, see if I can get him on air.
Yeah.
Stephen, I know you've got to go. You've been generous with your time. Stephen Greenhut, San Diego Union Tribune columnist and champion of civil rights. Hey, join us again sometime because we love your work, and we don't want you to be all alone up there in Sacramento.
Sounds good. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right. Godspeed. And Alfredo, I will definitely follow up on that because I missed that story, but I think that's really a chilling case because we carry our entire lives in our electronics. So
right.
Anyway,
and
hey, we got to take a break here, but thanks for the call. Well, Hillary Clinton may be coming for your guns. Donald Trump is gunning for CNBC. You ever wonder how they figure out the format for these debates? While every other Republican remained publicly silent, frontrunner Donald Trump got his closest rival, Dr. Ben Carson, to join him when they stood up to CNBC and just said no. And this kept Trump in the headlines and at the top of the news cycle throughout the afternoon and morning. And that's why Donald Trump is winning. Does anyone in the weak-kneed Republican establishment or among the bubbled morons in the punditocracy have any more questions about why the Donald appears to be coasting to the Republican nomination for President of the United States? Anyone? Anyone? I mean, this ain't rocket science. CNBC, which is part of the NBC network that openly partnered with a Democrat political firm that funneled more than $500 million into two pro-Hillary propaganda outlets, that's Vox and BuzzFeed, both of which have roundly demonized me over the years, I can tell you that. They turned their entire network over to the Clinton campaign for 5 days last week and thought they could pull a fast one. They wanted to expand the upcoming Republican presidential debate from 2 hours to 3. Now, why would they do that? Of course, the only reason they would do that is in order to allow the left-wing media to interrogate and make fools out of the Republican candidates. It's not like, if you watch the Democrat debate, it was like they basically had 3.5 minutes of an unpaid commercial. They had a 2-minute opening and a 90-second closing. So 3.5 minutes in front of a 15 million person audience. That's an infomercial. And Donald Trump's comment is great. He says, they get a commercial, we get Hunger Games. That's why I got to love this guy. He not only does he say it like it is, but he takes them to task and he stands up and fights. I mean, and he wins. By the way, did I mention that? This morning, CNBC caved and agreed to a 2-hour debate. And he was also negotiating for the exact same terms that the Democrats had, which is a two-minute opening and a 90-second closing, so that you actually have parity. I believe under law, and it's weird because you sort of have to go out and take your own private right of action to get the law actually enforced when you are a candidate, and you hear news media outlets saying they're going to that they have to give candidates equal time. Well, they really don't, and they largely don't. They pick their favorite. They give their favorite as much access to as many of the hosts as possible on many different shows, so they're all over the network. This happened to me. My opponent in the governor's race was friends with Rupert Murdoch and got a $27,000 check from Rupert Murdoch. So much for the entire unbiased impartiality that all these news outlets pretend. And the net result for me is I went from being on Fox News all the time on there were a couple different hosts that liked to have me on, like Stuart Varney, Greta Van Susteren, and a few others. I went from lots of coverage, talking about major issues, challenging Jerry Brown. I had been doing this since I got in the assembly, to zero coverage, to them actually having hosts like some guy named Richard Grenwell, who's just a complete abject moron, who got up there and published one of the sloppiest, most idiotic op-eds against me. It was obvious that he had been paid. He acted as a paid shill for my opponent, and there was nothing I could do about it unless I wanted to hire a team of lawyers, which I didn't have the resources to do. And here was the to add insult to injury. One day, my campaign manager got a call from Fox News, from one of their shows, and they said, "Hey, we want to see if Assemblyman Donnelly, candidate for governor, can he come on for a segment we're going to have on tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. And my campaign manager said, "Hey, no problem. Let me call you right back." Literally, we called him back 6 minutes later. I yelled at my campaign manager. I said, you should have just accepted on the spot, regardless of my schedule, because they're never going to offer it again. And 6 minutes later, they said they had the spot already booked, which you would never do. When you ask somebody to be on, you give them a few minutes to respond. They had reached a human being. All they needed to do was get an answer, and 6 minutes wasn't enough. But the whole thing was they didn't want to have me on. They were doing that to pretend to be offering equal time. And I love the fact that Donald Trump has the cojones to call him out. He has the testicular fortitude to create a showdown because he doesn't need them. They need Donald a lot more than Donald needs them. And when you look at what's really at stake, you've got a candidate like Jeb Bush, who, by the way, I don't know if you saw the headlines, but he's scaling back his campaign. He's raised a ton of money, but he's spending way too much, and he's not getting any traction. And in the latest poll, Ted Cruz is definitely pulling ahead, which is good news for conservatives. But Donald Trump is actually outmaneuvering and taking command of the media. And after watching 2 cycles of watching the most electable Republicans bow, scrape, and lose to the left-stream media, one thing the Republican base knows is that Donald Trump knows how to win a presidential election. And everything he's doing is the right stuff. Yeah, sometimes he's a little too much to handle, but the bottom line is that's fluff. It blows away. But the substance is there. And I'm not saying that I agree with Donald Trump on every issue, and I'm not endorsing him. I'm not doing any of that. But he's the only one who is continuing to stay in the news cycle, stay relevant, and take command of these issues and take it to the people. And he's taking it to the media. And he's doing it in a way, he's not whining like Jim Webb did the other night. That was pathetic. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are like, wow, it was nice to have an old school Democrat, somebody who's law and order, somebody who's, served in the military. And, of course, the CNBC and some of these other MSNBC are giving him grief for stressing and emphasizing his military service. Since when did it become a Republican or Democrat issue to be patriotic and to serve your country? I don't think either party has a corner on love of country. And I find it offensive when people suggest that. And as a matter of fact, I think most people, thinking people, are abandoning political parties in droves on both sides. And I've met a lot of great people who used to be Democrats who have become friends. We just had a caller, Alfredo from Barstow, who said he went from being a Democrat to a Republican. I met dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of them on the campaign trail here with the forced vaccination issue. And I think we're going to see a lot of this with guns. And I'm curious. I am curious if you're a former Democrat who has either become a Republican or an independent. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not trying to build up the Republican Party right now because I think if they did the right thing and stood up for civil liberties and stood up and took ownership, planted a flag when it comes to defending our freedoms from the government and just state it that clearly and stop being the panderers and the bill collectors of the military, industrial, police, prison, industrial complex. We need less government. We need less people being protected from themselves. And I want my money back. And I know a lot of other people do too. And that resonates with a lot of people, as you can see. And if it resonates with you, I'm just curious. If you used to be a Democrat and you left the Democrat Party, I would love to know why. But if you used to be a Republican and left the Republican Party, you're welcome to call in as well. Equal opportunity. Look at us. Equal opportunity here at the Tim Donnelly Show. 323-746-TALK is the number. We'll take your calls. You gotta love the Trump. My dad sent me a photograph of a sign in South Carolina. It just says Trump's Trumps. Trump Trumps. If you need any explanation, we can't help you. It's awesome. But back to the gun control debate. So you got Trump, who is standing up for civil liberties. You've got Trump, who is taking it to the media. And then you got Hillary, who wants to take your guns. She wants to institute an Australia-style gun confiscation program. And if you didn't hear when we opened the show today, I was talking about it's modeled after like a gun buyback. So the way I picture it going here in California, let's say that she becomes president and rolls out this federal confiscation program, but it's all masked as a gun buyback. It's so reasonable and common sense. We have an excess of firearms, and firearms, we get really, really, really offended when guns kill people. We don't care about baseball bats killing people. We don't care about knives killing people. We don't care about cars killing people. We don't care about cars driven by people who are inebriated or high killing people. We only care about guns killing people. Gun murders, gun deaths. Google that sometime. You'll be shocked at how much information, and most of it's propaganda, there is out there. On this show, we don't tolerate propaganda, and we get to the bottom of the facts. Facts are funny things, because when you have command of them, all of a sudden you can be dangerous. And there was a study commissioned by Harvard that featured two of these professor types, lawyer types, that wanted to get to the bottom of the discussion as to whether or not guns were responsible for violence, and that when there were more guns, was there more violence. And they were surprised to discover that when the guns were in the hands of private citizens, unlike guns in the hands of the government, which is a very different proposition, when only the government has the guns, guess what? There is more violence. And one of the things they looked at was, of course, the case study in Russia. And there was far more violence going on in Russia than there was in the United States, even though per capita there were more guns in the United States than there were in Russia. But the guns were not in the hands of the citizens. The research was done actually by attorneys Don Cates and Dr. Gary Mauser. And the key to the whole thing was that the guns be in the hands of private citizens. You know, and that backs up the vision of the founders. They always envisioned individuals. And the Second Amendment is an individual right, but it is also a right to form a militia. And that confuses some people. But it is an individual right, and we are the militia. And we are the militia not for the government, not to be conscripted by the government, but to protect freedom from the government, because our founders knew, and they were deeply concerned about the government becoming the greatest threat, the threat that it is today to our freedom and to our natural rights. And it was amazing in this study, which was entitled, "Would Banning Firearms Reduce Murder and Suicide?" Among the following, writes BeliefNet, the popular assertion that the United States has the industrialized world's highest murder rate, says the Harvard study, is a throwback to the Cold War, when the Russian murder rates were nearly 4 times higher than U.S. In a strategic disinformation campaign, the United States was painted worldwide as a gunslinging nightmare of street violence, far worse than what was going on in Russia. The line was repeated so many times that many believed it to be true. Now they still do. You know, they interviewed a Soviet KGB defector, Yuri Bezmenov, who pointed out that strategic disinformation campaigns were common. Well, you know what? The strategic, and he gives an examples of some of the stuff the KGB was responsible for. Smearing FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover as a homosexual when that was something that would completely undermine his credibility. World War II era pontiff Pope Pius VII as a Nazi collaborator and other such examples. But see, today, we don't need the KGB to run a disinformation campaign because we have NBC and we have CBS and we have ABC and we have CNN and we have Fox. We have all these different alphabet soup names for the press, but the press has been co-opted. The press is no longer a watchdog. The press is no longer operating under that First Amendment dictate that they hold the government accountable. That was what the freedom of the press was for, to back up the individual citizen's right to seek redress of their grievances from their government. But now, in order to get access, the press becomes lapdogs. The press also, every one of the members of the press has their own ideological underpinnings and beliefs. And guess what? They spill over into what they choose to cover. Yes, they put on a panoply of pretending to be bipartisan and cover all sides of an issue. But in the end, they always have a point of view. And that's fine. Have a point of view. But disclose it. Let everybody know where you stand. It was a study that was done back in right after Clinton was elected. 71% of journalists actually admitted they voted for Bill Clinton. And yet, of course, they pretend to be impartial. But the greatest danger is not the press. The greatest danger is a government that uses the press to send out disinformation to disarm you and trample your rights. Stay tuned. We got a great guest coming up right after this break. Hey, you might have read a story in the newspaper about a Department of Corrections program that allows, quote unquote, violent inmates to fight fires side by side with professional firefighters. And I've read a couple of versions of this story, and including one where the union firefighters union leader, member, whatever, expressed outrage that they could possibly be serving next to someone who was a dangerous criminal. And sometimes you read a story and it just doesn't quite gel with reality. And the reason I can say that so confidently is for 8 years, I did a Bible study in a prison camp that was one of these fire camps where inmates go only on their best behavior. They earn the right to go there because then they get better food, more freedom, and they actually can get paid. It's only $1 an hour, but it's something, and they get something even more important than that. They start to earn back their respect, so that when they re-enter society, they have a running start, and they can make something of themselves. And over that 8 years, I met many, many, many inmates, and got to know them, gave them my cell number, and became friends with some. I'm going to bring one on right now. I'm only going to give his first name. His name is Frankie, and Frankie was one of the inmates that I knew the longest. Frankie, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Tim?
It is going fantastic. And the reason I brought you on and asked you to come on and talk about this is because you were someone that I knew the longest. You were in the earned your way into the fire camp program. What did you have to do to get in there and stay in there?
Excuse me?
What did you have to do to stay in the fire camp program?
Basically, you have to program. You go by all the rules, and you have to have, no point.
So you got to be on really good behavior.
Exactly. You pretty much have to program, and you got to want it.
Yeah. It was hard work. I mean, I saw you guys out there. You guys were out there in the off season, cutting down trees, clearing brush, and doing really, really hard work. And then when you were on the fires, you guys were always given the grunt work, digging, going out on the fire lines and cutting brush, which in really miserable conditions.
It was, and it was teaching us good work ethics.
So I knew you for, I want to say, close to 7 years. When I was there, I started a program with an older man named Jim, who then passed away. And
correct.
And then
we miss very much.
Yes, we do. And then I became the Bible study leader, and you and I had a one-on-one because nobody else showed up to the study one day, and it blew my mind because I didn't realize what I didn't know. And when I talked to you, you explained to me that it had sort of been in your family to be in the drug business. And, just like someone might be in the accounting business or somebody else might be a lawyer or a teacher or something. And I'd never encountered any of that. You grew up in that. And yet you did something that almost no one in your family has really been able to do. And you broke out of that. And you've been outside. You've made a living for yourself, an honest living. You've worked hard. And tell us a little bit about that. How long have you been out, and how long have you been, what are you doing now in terms of work generically?
Well, I've been out since '07, and a part of that is because of the work ethic that I got from fire camp. It made me a better man. It gave me the ethics that I needed to go out there and work hard. Not just that, it gave me an inspiration because I learned how to climb trees. I learned how to cut trees. I learned how to fight fires. And I utilized that when I got out. And that's what kept me out. And even to this day, I still trim trees. Right now, my current job, I'm a plumber, obviously because the tree business is slow, but I'm always trimming trees for whoever needs trees trimmed, So that's what that helps.
So you've been
firefighter
for 8 years. You've been on the outside working and supporting your family, and you now have is it 2 sons?
I have 3 sons and my beautiful wife Monique.
Okay, I can't keep up. But you are a success story of the fire camps where you learned a work ethic, and there's a lot of criticism right now in the newspapers where they're saying that violent felons
Kim,
are serving.
The thing is, pardon me. The thing is, it doesn't matter about your past when you're fighting fires and you're out there. When you're out there, you feel a responsibility that you are doing something noble, and you're making a difference in other people's lives. You forget all about the politics. You forget all about prison. We're not in prison when we're on that CCV. We're out there helping the community. And that's what the community needs to understand, is that we are people too. And we are trying to change just like the rest. So after doing 10 years straight, I've been out 8 years. So I am a success. And I owe it all to, given the opportunity to go to fire camp.
Now, you guys one time, I remember you guys came back after a really, really disastrous fire. I mean, this thing was spreading like crazy through the foothills, like near Rancho Cucamonga. And you guys were running rooftop to rooftop, saving people's homes and risking your own lives. And the residents were so grateful to you that I just remember it made a huge impact on you guys.
That's what I'm saying. We're making a difference out there. We were actually in people's homes because they were on fire, and we were able to put out the fires. And we were inmates at a fire correctional camp.
Wow. So when people say that firefighters are put at risk because there are violent felons who might be able to get into that program, and I went through the articles, they rule out murder, they rule out anybody who has committed a truly violent, anyone who's an arsonist, kidnapper, sex offender, gang affiliate, serving life sentences for murder or other crimes has already been excluded. So,
of course.
Right. So, I mean, but you met the criterion. You went there, and many, many other men that I met who went through the program, and I saw it as one of the most positive. And I'm not, you know me, I'm anti-government. I don't want more government. I don't want the government to steal from you now that you're a citizen and you're out there earning a living. You don't want them stealing any more of your tax dollars than necessary to take care of the roads and, pay the whatever we have to pay for. But this was a program that I saw change lives. I mean, I really, truly saw it. I saw men who developed a work ethic, who developed a desire to go straight and make a life on the outside. And I've talked to a number of former inmates who are now great citizens. They could be your neighbor, and they're wonderful people. And you'd love to know them. You'd like to have them over for dinner. And it was due to this program. And I just feel like it's gotten a bad rap. And, were you aware of anyone who was really a problem who got in there? And if so, how was it dealt with?
Well, obviously, if anyone was a problem, they were taken out of the program and they were returned behind the wall. And there's not many because we are people. When you're in that program, who wants to be behind a wall? Who wants to be locked up in a cell being told what to do? We have freedom. And with that freedom, you have to follow rules and you have to go along with the program.
So there's responsibility.
You're learning many skills. Exactly.
There's responsibility.
And we did. Exactly. We learned a lot of skills, and they don't just teach you firefighting. There's all kinds of trades that you're learning.
Well,
it's not Camp Snoopy. It's
great.
A rehabilitation. It's something that is helping people. And let me tell you this. People may judge by our appearance, but when we're out there saving their homes, they would not care if you had tattoos on your face, on your head. They will give you a hug and embrace you like if you were their child because you are helping the community. They see no color line when you are out there saving their homes. And that's what we're doing at fire camps.
Yeah, and
so
look.
Whoever disagrees, I believe whoever's trying to shut that down is trying to obviously pocket money or trying to put it somewhere else.
Well, there's always an agenda. There's always an agenda. We always follow the money here at the Tim Donnelly Show. But look, Frankie, the key thing is exactly what you said, and that is when you have a program that actually works, when you've got firefighters who are out there on the front lines, they need somebody on the back lines helping them. And you guys were always there, mostly in a support capacity, not always fighting the fire, but doing the drudge work that a lot of professional firefighters probably don't want to do. And I bet they were appreciative of you guys being there too.
Honestly, if you had firefighters on this talk show, they would tell you 100% that the California correction firefighters do maybe 80% of the work. 80% of the work. Because we are the most, yeah, it's true. Trust me, I've been out there through thick and thin fighting fires. Where they don't want to go, they send us. Why? Because they know we will go.
Well, Frankie, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. You were a great success story. You're an inspiration to me. And, I wish you all the best with your family and your endeavors. Hopefully you invested in a couple of stocks. You're not just, you're saving some of that money you're earning and setting it aside for those 3 kids you got.
All right. Thank you very much, and you have a wonderful day.
Hey, God bless and Godspeed. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with the Tim Donnelly Show. 323-746-TALK if you have a comment. That may be one of the only times you ever hear me praise a government program. If you missed the segment, we were talking about there's a program where inmates can earn money and earn respect and rebuild their lives and begin to prepare themselves mentally and emotionally and habitually, changing their habits and their mentality to re-enter society and learn how to work hard and earn the respect of their commanding officers. And they work really hard for that $1 an hour. And by the way, one of the things we didn't discuss, I had a former inmate on who was in a program at the Pilot Rock Fire Camp where I used to hold a Bible study for close to 8 years. And one of the things that they told me is they love being out on the fires. They love being out there sleeping under the stars, working. It was like camping, but then they got to eat really good steak, potatoes, great food was one of the rewards. And it's amazing what people will do for a reward. It's like free markets. They work. And I'm disappointed to see the firefighter union spokesman saying they're shocked and horrified that their members were out there and that supposedly violent felons. Look, these guys have been screened. They're closely watched. And as Frankie stated, the past is not what they're thinking about when they're out there trying to save somebody's home and literally also needing to preserve their own lives. In many cases, those guys have been in some tough scrapes where fire has overwhelmed them and they've come close to losing their own lives, all in defense of somebody else's property. But see, that's a good thing because they begin to feel this connection to the community that they didn't have before. So I think there aren't many programs that are worth a damn. There certainly aren't many government programs worth a damn. But what I witnessed firsthand for almost 10 years, almost a decade, was the transformation of men's lives who, whether you like it or not, have the potential to be your neighbors. I'd rather that they learn a work ethic and change those skills and habit and mentality than not. And it was one of those it is one of those programs. I hope that we continue and expand. It was funny. I was sitting in the airport in Sacramento, I don't know, about a month after I got elected, first time. And a guy kept looking at me. Finally came up to me. He said, "Are you Tim Donnelly?" And he had no idea I'd been elected to anything. It was the funniest thing. And he remembered me from that. And we talked about his experience out there because, see, one of the things that's really hard is when you've been incarcerated, how do you get a job? That's a catch-22 because you can't lie about it. If you do that, nothing's ever going to change for you. So you've got to be open and honest and upfront. And I had talked with these guys about how to approach that and what to do and how to dress for an interview. Yes, we taught some life skills in addition to the Bible. You know, we had a Bible study, but we also taught some life skills. And this guy wound up getting a job installing light fixtures for some company that was going all over the state doing it, and totally new life for him. Anyway, coming up, we got AWR Hawkins. We're going to go back to guns and more guns. Hey, you are listening to the Radio Free California Network, and I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. And we're going to go right to the Radio Free California newsmaker line and bring on Tim Donnelly's show favorite, Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins, who is a military historian. He has a PhD in that and a master's in other things, but he is probably one of the foremost experts that I've ever met on everything to do with the Second Amendment. And for a twofer, he's also written an article about Hillary Clinton's illegal alien outreach, which you will not believe. Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins, welcome back to the show.
Oh, Tim, thank you. Great to be with you.
And I forgot to mention, Breitbart columnist. I knew there was something in there.
Yep.
You've written. I want to start with guns because we're in it out here in California. You were part of the great gun control debate we held last week with Lisa Bloom of the Bloom Law Firm, and you largely annihilated many of the points she was making in bringing forth this sort of left stream media narrative, and which was great. But they're pushing under the auspices of common sense gun control. Every failed legislative idea in the last 2 sessions in California has been cobbled together, thrown into an initiative called Measure X. And Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom is pushing that, and he'll be able to raise millions of dollars to basically end the Second Amendment in California.
Right. No, you're exactly right. The initiative, it'll require anyone who's buying ammunition to go through a background check, just like you do at a retailer for a gun. It will require anyone who has a greater than 10-round capacity ammunition magazine, even in places where in a situation where they're illegal to own but illegal to buy. He wants to change that so that 10-round magazine, anything that exceeds that, must be turned into the police. I don't remember his time frame.
Yeah, so
it'll be a
to
30
criminalize
days.
You, to turn you into a criminal for owning something that you legally bought.
It just keeps going from there. I mean, there are new confiscatory rules, how gun confiscation will take place, new allotments or allowances for that. On and on we go. It's a big initiative, and it is dangerous, and people need to oppose it tooth and nail.
So here's my question. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. If I make it harder for you who are driving home right now to pick up a box of 22 or 45 or 38 or 223, whatever your round of choice, You're trying to, it's you're driving home from work. You want to get some range time in, get a little bit of therapy, vent from all the craziness here in California. And you gotta go through a background check? How's that going to make anyone any safer?
Right. Well, and think about this, Tim. And think about this. If that initiative passed, they would have to ban internet ammunition sales in California. They'd have to ban them. They would have to ban anything tied to the internet almost because everything would require a background check going forward. I mean, you're talking about an insidious measure, to say the least.
Oh yeah, and we tried. By the way, they tried to push that through the assembly in the Senate when I was there, and we killed it. It was a horrible idea because it's going to drive up the cost of ammo. It's going to turn California into this California only, like we are with everything else, which then makes it cost more because you've restricted the market.
Right. Well, and once they have a crime, Tim, that's big enough that it catches national news, what they will do then is they'll say, you know what, we made a mistake. We are only making you pass background checks for new ammo. We need everyone to turn their ammo over to the police or go to the police, tell them how many rounds you have, go through a background check for those rounds. There's going to be a paper trail that will follow an initiative like this. They'll be one crime away from putting that into place, and Californians simply have to be smarter than to go for this.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the problem. You're going to have the George Soros types of the world pouring millions of dollars into this because they've been trying to push gun control through the UN. And now here they have the perfect plum opportunity because basically the guy who's going to become the standard bearer of the Democrat Party in California, who's going to replace Jerry Brown, Jerry Brown, as bad as he is and as Marxist, progressive, and socialist and leftist as he is, he was moderate on gun rights by vetoing a number of the most egregious assaults on the Second Amendment. But this Gavin Newsom, this guy is taking the Democrat Party in a direction that I think is really dangerous.
Right. Well, he's going the same way Hillary Clinton's going. He's just doing it at a state level instead of a national level.
Yeah, what's up with her? She wants to bring the Australia-style buybacks and gun confiscations to the United States.
Right. And you put that really well, Tim, because that's what she wants to do. She wants to slip this in, that it's not confiscation, Tim. We're not confiscating your guns. We just have a mandatory buyback. And so we're going to give you what she called a fair price for your gun. Now, I'm sorry, Tim, if you got that gun from your father, so it means more to you than $200. We're sorry, but when we looked in the gun book said the gun was worth about $200, so that's what we're going to give you. I mean, that's what she's talking about, forcing on every American.
You ain't getting it till you pry it from my cold dead hand, and then you're going to have to deal with my sons because that's the way I've trained them.
It. Without being offensive, Americans need to let I'm not going to say, I don't know how to word it. I'm just saying the purpose of the Second Amendment was to defend ourselves, not simply from a tyranny without, but a tyranny within. And Americans have to understand that. And that's not an encouragement for anyone to use a gun. Anyone who hears me right now, it's not an encouragement to do something silly with a gun. What it is an encouragement to read and understand you own that gun, not only for a defense of your life, but a defense of your liberty. And Americans somehow have to get back to that.
That is exactly right. And it's why I brought you on the show today, because I was so angry when this first came out, I could barely speak. I lost command of language for a period of time. I should apologize to the audience. But here's the thing, and I agree with you. When I say that if you come to get my guns, you're getting them bullets first, that is not a threat. That's not an offensive threat. That is a guarantee that I will not comply and I will not give in to tyranny. That's all. Right. And so if you want to act in a tyrannical way and you want to threaten my liberty, there will be a consequence. But that is me giving a warning, and I'm saying it with all due respect. because I will defend my freedom to the death, and I will defend the Constitution. And I think there's a lot of Americans who feel that way, and they don't put it into words. They're a silent majority of patriots who are the last best hope of this country if we get someone like Hillary Clinton or Gavin Newsom in control.
Right. No, you're exactly right. I heard Walter E. Williams, George Mason University, is one of my heroes, and I heard him once talk about the situation Americans would be in if they weren't armed. He was talking about the overreach of the EPA that we see right now, and it's a continually expanding overreach. And he wasn't making excuses for them. But Walter Williams said, "You think it's bad now. How do you think it would look if you were unarmed?" And he said, if you were unarmed, they would come take over your backyard because a rare 7-legged spider was found in a mud puddle by the tree in your backyard. And he went on and on to talk, and he just stopped, and he goes, "Folks, the lesson is this: don't ever give up your guns." And that's the motto. We have to rally under that.
That I couldn't say it any better. Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins, Breitbart columnist, PhD in military history and all things Second Amendment. We're going to take a quick break and come back, and I want to change topics and talk about Hillary's illegal alien outreach. You won't believe it. We'll be right back. So Hillary Clinton is launching a new initiative to reach out to, I assume, Hispanics, but in reality, she wants to reach out to illegals. And Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins joins us, and say it ain't so, but she hired a former illegal alien to do her Latino outreach.
Exactly right. She hired a former illegal alien. I believe she's a Peruvian, and whose mother is still an illegal alien. The family moved here illegally when the girl was 10 years old. And after she took part in a rally for Dreamers, she was one, this particular illegal, who is now not an illegal via marriage, but she took part in a rally in 2010 in Kentucky and encouraged people to come out the way gay couples or gay individuals came out. She encouraged them to come out and not be ashamed of being illegal, to tell people they were illegal and make them deal with it. Of course, she used the word undocumented, but that's like calling abortion termination. You can't do that. You need to use the language. So she told people not to be ashamed of being illegal, and now she works for Hillary in Latino outreach. And you're exactly right. She's trying to round up voters. That's got to be states like Florida.
It's got to be really offensive to Democrats who actually believe in the rule of law. And I know there are many, because when I was working to repeal the DREAM Act, about a quarter of the people who were helping us were self-identified liberal Democrats. And the idea that just because of someone's skin color or ideology or last name, you're going to pick them to be or assume that they're all going to go along with this agenda of actually endorsing illegal immigration, undermining the rule of law, and putting Americans essentially at a disadvantage. I think it's really offensive, and I think there's a lot of Democrats that are going to be upset about this.
Right. Well, I think you hit on something, Tim. It's something I talk about with friends all the time. But when the Democrats approach things this way, when Hillary Clinton does, she is betraying the fact that she assumes skin color either indicates a certain degree of intelligence a certain degree of cognizance, or it tells us something about the tastes of anyone who has that particular skin color. I mean, one of those three things, perhaps all of those three things, are on Hillary's mind when she hires this Latino outreach person who used to be an illegal immigrant. And it's an assumption that everybody who looks like her as far as skin color goes, they all think the same. And it should be taken as an insult. And that's why it doesn't shock me when you say 1/3 of the people that helped you were self-identifying liberal Democrats. It doesn't shock me because people who think about what Hillary's doing should be insulted, especially people who fit the description of the kind of people that she's reaching out for now. They should be doubly insulted by this.
Well, yeah. And look, if I believe when you run a political campaign, you get a lot further. And maybe I'm just wrong. But when I ran for governor, we identified principles on which our campaign was going to fight. And those principles were centered around liberty, centered around the Constitution, first principles, smaller government by constitutionally restricting government's power, and things of that nature. Of course, civil liberties, gun rights, the NSA spying on us, all these kinds of issues were at the forefront. What we discovered is when you staked out very strong territory around specific principles and issues, you brought people from every economic background, every racial background, and from every political party and ideology because you gave them something to unite together on. And this stuff, as you said, it's so offensive because it's based on an assumption that if you have this skin color or this last name, you must think this way.
Right. And, I'll tell you something that bothers me, and I'm not trying to get off the subject. This is just an extension of it, but you brought it up. You talk about stressing liberty and stressing constitutionalism and different things. See, I worry when I watch Hillary Clinton, do we have the courage to be free? Because being free is not a simple thing. Our founding fathers proved that. Being free is not a simple thing. Every combat veteran who has died on the battlefield proves that. Every combat veteran that has come back home proves that. Being free is not easy, and I'm worried that Clinton is assuming that we've crossed the threshold where she can win the office by degrading freedom but offering a handout in return. That's what I'm scared of. And we as a people have to be more courageous than that. We have to say, look, even if it would benefit me in the immediacy, even if it would mean a check for me in the immediacy, I don't want any part of it. Freedom means more to me than that. That's how we have to think.
Well, when I was working on this campaign against forced vaccinations here in California, one thing that came up in the course of discussing the issue was, why are we so afraid of freedom? What's wrong with having the ability to make an informed decision? Why are we so happy to have the government force that decision on someone else and on ourselves? Rather than literally do a little bit of research and come up with the conclusion for yourself. And there is a fear of freedom that I think is infecting our culture right now, where people are more than happy to dictate to others and tolerate being dictated to by government rather than having government rule at our consent.
No, I agree 100%. I couldn't agree more. Once we become divorced from history, which we've largely done in this country, and the warnings are there and people don't listen, but once you're divorced from your past, you really have no future. And it's not that you have no future in a way that you're not going to live tomorrow or you're not going to live next week, but it means you have no future because you have no designated path you're on. Your history is gone. And I used to have a professor that would say to me all the time, if you want to understand the future, you have to first understand the past. And that you want to know where you're going, look at where you've been. And where we are now, that's why we don't appreciate freedom. We're not willing to put any work in. We're not willing to take any risk because we're completely cut off from the risks that were taken to get us where we are. We don't know what the founders did. We don't know what the Vietnam vets did. We don't know what the Korean War vets went through. We don't know what it was like to sleep in a hole on Hill 53 in Korea. We don't know those things anymore. And until we know those things again, we will not be willing to sacrifice for freedom, and that is a sad thing.
Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins, is there any period of time that you could compare that we are going through right now historically? In less than 60 seconds.
That is a hard one. I mean, to see people cut off from their history, that was a tactic of Charlemagne when he was conquering areas. And that's a long time ago. But Charlemagne, when he would conquer areas, he would cut down all the religious symbols that a people had so that he could cut them off from their past and therefore control them.
Wow.
Now, that's not really answering your question, but that's an example. That's how he purposely operated to control people. And I'm just saying, learn a lesson, folks. Look at how Charlemagne operated, and it benefited him. But see, today, the people that benefits are Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or people who agree with them. It's time to change that tactic. Instead of tearing up our history, hold on to our history, teach your kids our history. Until we start passing those lessons down again, Tim, we're done.
Hey, final word, Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins. Thanks for coming on. We'll be right back after these messages. You know, we talk a lot about guns on this show because I love guns. I love freedom. You can't get any better than Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins. I have never heard anyone more articulate when you combine history and firearms and freedom. It is such a potent and powerful combination when it is in the hands of that man who is the doctor of history and all things Second Amendment related. However, when you're out there and you want to go shooting, you got to go somewhere. You can't just go. I mean, I suppose there are places you can just go out and shoot, but if you really want to train, and if you really want to go someplace beautiful, you ought to go to the Burro Canyon Shooting Park, which has been a long, since the very inception, sponsor of this show. It is owned by two wonderful patriots, and they've got over 600 acres, 19 private ranges. Bring a picnic lunch, enjoy the natural beauty while you shoot. And by the way, if you mention the Tim Donnelly Show, they will give you, as long as you're paying to shoot, they will give you a free hat or a coffee cup as long as supplies last. Check them out, burrocanyon.com, or give them a call at 626-910-1344. That's 626-910-1344. And, you know, given the assault and the threat that is a clear and present danger to our freedom, and that is a Hillary Clinton presidency. She was on the, if you heard her on the news, spouting some nonsense about, oh yeah, I hunted when I was a kid. You know what? I don't care. I don't want to hear your talk where you're trying to pander now all of a sudden because Democrats are starting to push back. When you talk about mandatory buybacks and confiscation of my rights, you can go pound sand. There's some choice words I'd like to say, but I don't know if I could get bleeped out well enough because they need to be said. But the bottom line is, Dr. A.W. Hawkins was right. This is about an attitude. This is about an American attitude. And it's the attitude that has brought us from being a people who were oppressed back in our Mother England and other European nations, and then came here seeking freedom and understanding that the only way that we have any chance is by determining our own destiny. And the only way that was going to happen was separating. And the only way that was going to happen was war and standing up against a dictator who was a king, but he was a dictator. And it's the more and more I think about it, the more and more I look at the political landscape right now. We are slipping into socialism in terms of an economic system. But even more dangerous is we're sliding down into an abyss where the government becomes the determiner of our rights, where government agencies, by the way, the IRS is as well armed as some small armies. Why is that? Why do we need armed IRS agents? I'm sorry. I would rather they get a warrant and a court order and have to bring law enforcement along with them. They're not law enforcement. Why do they have M16s? Why do they get to own special ammo that the general public can't buy? They're the IRS. And by the way, I want them completely disarmed. I actually want them abolished because they saw fit to take away my freedom and my right to legally, lawfully assemble with whomever the hell I want at a tea party, and they wanted to suppress that. They worked to suppress that. Let us not forget. And what did the Tea Party want? I mean, what is the justification for such an onerous abuse? It's not an overreach. It is a clear case of abuse. It is a clear case of tyrannical behavior where you are given power and you abuse it because they didn't want their little fiefdom, their big fiefdom, their monolithic agency to be threatened. They didn't want their jobs to be at risk. They didn't want to have to suffer the risk of being unemployed that millions and millions and millions of Americans suffer every day in the private sector. You got a government job, you got a government job for life. As long as you make sure that nobody comes to threaten it. Well, what would the threat be? The threat would be we would find a more efficient way to collect taxes from people, maybe a way where we actually align the interests of the American people with the tax code, or align the tax code with the interests of the American people. Instead of taxing income, why don't we tax consumption? Then you would encourage savings. And there's a bunch of formulas out there. I don't want to get a bunch of calls or emails saying, you got it all wrong. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of theories and they're worthy of discussion. It would be nice if we had, a Republican Congress. Oh, that's right. We have one. You'd think they'd be debating these ideas because this is the sort of reform. Can you imagine if we got rid of 97,717 IRS agents and replace them with a robot or a computer? Just a computer that just processes data. Just like a credit card company has very sophisticated computers that can process millions of transactions from around the world. And you could literally punch in a couple of numbers, put in your income, if we were going to continue with an income tax, and if it were a flat tax and everybody paid the same, and it wouldn't matter whether you made $1,500 or whether you made $15 million or $15 billion. No progressive, no nothing. Just simple. Everybody knows the rules. There's no deductions. Here it is. End of story. Or some combination of a flat tax and a consumption tax. Of course, if you levy a consumption tax, then you have to figure out a way to do it universally, because if you don't, then people will simply go to another state to consume those goods where there is no tax. It's just human nature. It's like when you cross the border into Arizona or Oregon or any other state but California, gas prices plummet. And there are states where you can go where there's no sales tax. And then there are other states where there's no income tax. So people want to live in the state with no income tax. I believe that's Washington, and go to the state with no sales tax, Oregon. And there you have it. It's the perfect scenario. But instead, we're slipping into an abyss of unchecked government control over our lives. That's what this is about. It's not about guns. It ain't about whether you like guns. It's about whether you love freedom. That's what's at stake. 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls, your last chance to get in before we go. Be right back.
Tonight, American soldier, I'm an American.
Speaking of American soldiers, there was an Army reservist who was found dead in St. Louis on Thursday. He'd been shot. He was going to look at a used car that had been advertised on Craigslist. Demolition workers found the body of Robert Lovings Polk, 22, in the Baden area of North St. Louis. And, you know, we got these men and women who serve this country. And right now, our policy is for them to walk around disarmed, unarmed. And this is just a reminder that we need to actually increase the Second Amendment, not decrease it, because it could be the difference between life and death. I don't know all the details of what happened there, but I certainly know that he was shot, and if he had had a firearm, certainly with someone who was trained to use it, he would have had a fighting chance, but he is no longer with us. These are the kind of people we need. Those who are willing to put their lives on the line for our freedom. I want to give them every fighting chance. I want to trust them. I would rather trust them than trust the government. And yeah, you know what the risk is? The risk is we might be wrong once in a while. The risk is there might be a shooting once in a while. The risk is that in a free society, people are free. And some people, no matter what you do, there will always be a very, very small percentage of people who are overcome by evil. And no matter how hard you try, no matter how many laws you pass, you can't change that. But now the evil's coming from the government. It's not just from those who want to go commit a mass murder. There will always be those. There have always been those. This is not a new phenomenon. Remember Lizzie Borden with her axe, and there are hundreds and hundreds of examples throughout history. But now the government, in particular, led by leftist Marxist progressives, in the name of safety, wish to deprive you of your essential liberties and of your ability to defend your natural right, and the inalienable ones that are identified in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You can't do that if you're not safe. But the government can't keep you safe. They cannot make a guarantee of your safety, but they can allow you to exercise your rights. Let me put it a different way, because we shouldn't be sitting around waiting for the government to allow us. Screw that. The only way you will be safe is if you exercise. That means you stand up and you say, you know what, I'm going to carry. Now, some of you might only be comfortable carrying if you go and get a CCW. Well, I'm not going to stand in your way. Go for it. That's the law-abiding way. But in the end, you have a right, and you can either exercise that right or you can lose it. You can either exercise that right or you can allow it to be so severely infringed legislatively as it has been here in California that you no longer have that right. You no longer enjoy that right. Therefore, you are no longer free. And that is what is at stake in the coming months with this Measure X. Gavin Newsom, who wants to be our next governor here in California, who wants to force you to go through a background check to buy some bullets. He wants to force you to turn over legally lawful property that you bought. He wants the government to take it. You must turn it over to a cop or sell it out of state. You know what, Gavin Newsom? F you. Yeah, that's what I said. F you. You want a war? We'll give you a war. You want to come and take our guns? Try it. You're worthless, scurrilous, principleless, cheating piece of you-know-what. You will never be our governor. You can run this stupid Measure X all you want. You can try to deprive Americans of a fundamental natural right, and you're going to find out that there's a whole hell of a lot more Americans in California than you ever bargained for. Usually I try to end the show on a happy-go-lucky note, and I'm struggling with that because this just infuriates me. It ticks me off. And if you're not ticked off, there's something wrong with you. You got to check that. Because this is literally the battleground for our freedom. Ain't in any other state. It is California. We can't afford any more patriots to leave. It's all hands on deck. And that means you need to stay tuned to the Tim Donnelly Show, 3 to 6, every weekday. And if it's not on a station near you, call them up and ask them why. Because this is war. And this matters. You want to pass down the legacy of freedom to your children and grandchildren. Well, freedom has never been so fragile as it is right now on the precipice of the government takeover and infringement of fundamental natural rights, the encroachment of our liberties, and the complete control over our lives that they portend. I wish I were overstating the case, but the reality is right before us. And the question becomes, as it has been stated on this show many times, our mission is inform, educate, and engage. We are going to be engaged in this battle on this issue because firearms equal freedom. Forget about everything else. Forget about the media narrative. It is literally about whether you are going to have the ability to defend your freedom from the greatest threat, which now is the government. God bless you and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show out. What so proudly we hailed at the twilight